What is transitional justice and what is the history of transitional justice in Taiwan?
Transitional justice is a legal and political mechanism pursued by societies that have experienced systematic violence or human rights violation, aiming to overcome their past and pursue reconciliation. It includes truth-seeking, prosecution, compensation for victims, and institutional reform. The global trend towards pursuing traditional justice has expanded beyond the concept of political transition in comparative politics, and it has spread around the world since the 1980s, starting in Latin America. This includes the democratization of authoritarian or totalitarian regimes, a conflict resolution in the context of nation building after civil war, and redressing historical injustice in post-colonial region or among indigenous populations. In modern Taiwan political history, the development of transitional justice has been multi-layered and has followed these kind of global trends. After the initial reform for democratization during the Li Denghui administration, the government began to redress the past wrongdoings of the 228 incident and the White Terror, which was state violence by the KMT authoritarian government. It was in response to demands from victims' families and the opposition's activists claiming for the state responsibility and political rehabilitation under the martial law. The government's policy of apology and compensation for victims gradually took root, even through three-time regime shifts from KMT to the DPP. The demand for transitional justice spread to civil society through the media, and during the Chen Shui-bian administration, the concept of transitional justice was introduced by intellectuals in advocacy group who had led movement for democracy. Under this Taiwan administration, a special agency called the Taiwan Transitional Justice Commission was established under the Executive Yuan based on the Transitional Justice Promote Act. Soon after her first inauguration, Tsai Ing-wen became the first ROC president in history to publicly apologize for the persecution of indigenous peoples by Taiwanese government at every time, including Qing dynasty, Japanese colonial rule, the KMT authoritarian rule, and the current democratic regime.
This week was the 76th anniversary of the 228 massacre, which occurred in February of 1947, or at least it began at that time. This event, what kind of role does it have in Taiwan's historical memory and also in its transitional justice process?
The 28 incident, which is widely discussed by scholars, had a significant impact on Taiwanese society. I think this incident occurred when Taiwan was struggling to define its identity socially and legally after being liberated from colonialism. It bounced around between different ruling powers until Japan surrendered in 1945 and Taiwan was handed over to the Republic of China. But here is the things. Taiwan didn't get the same status as a Chinese province. Instead, it was placed under the colonial-like special rule of the Taiwan Provincial Administration Office, right? So for a while, it was like one country, two system between Taiwan and mainland China at that time. But less than 2 years later, this 228 massacre went down, a total state terror attack to the Taiwanese citizen. This escalated the ethnic conflict between mainlanders and Taiwanese people, and eventually led to the formation of a unique Taiwanese ethnicity. So transitional justice in Taiwan has been fueled by grassroots democracy movement in civil society, similar to the other regions worldwide. Taiwan's multi-ethnic society and its exceptional status in terms of sovereignty have promoted the ROC Taiwanese regime to incorporate transitional justice claims from every ethnic group into its policy agenda as a means of legitimizing its governance. As Taiwan undergoes democratization and the Taiwanization of the ROC, the government has approached the issue of overcoming the past in a manner that considers Taiwan's unique identity instead of adopting a one-sided ideological approach. By framing the issue as a matter of historical justice, the government can draw on Taiwanese national memory and establish it as a foundation for national unity. This transitional justice process has fostered a progressive political culture in Taiwan that is grounded in a shared historical memory among every ethnic group on this island. The culture aimed to overcome all forms of state violence perpetrated in Taiwan. Externally, Taiwan's transitional justice policy served as an effective soft power tool underscore its legitimacy of governance. It emphasized that Taiwan needs a democratic and liberal government capable of confronting past state violence against the Chinese Communist Party in mainland China. I think this is a function of Taiwanese transitional justice.
You earlier mentioned the Transitional Justice Commission, which disbanded last year, as one of the main institutions of transitional justice in Taiwan. However, that commission was very controversial from its inception. Why is that?
Yes, in general, progressive policies such as transitional justice are controversial. If you do it, you will be criticized by conservatives, and if you don't, or even if you do, be criticized by reformers in terms of how you do it. So either way, it will be controversial. I think the main reason for the controversy is that it tends to be seen as an instrumental use of transitional justice by the administration, both by conservative oppositions and by human rights advocacy groups. For example, the revelation of a private conversation in 2018 before the local election, in which the chief of the Transitional Justice Commission discussed using information about the past incident involving state violence for negative election campaign against the KMT candidate. This is a typical example of why citizens see transitional justice as being politicized. Indigenous people also, who see no prospect for resolution of the land and autonomy issues, also criticize the administration's slogan of transitional justice for indigenous people. Although the Transitional Justice Commission has made thousands of documents related to political persecution public by the end of the time of its dissolution, the important files on the Chen Wencheng and Lin Yixiong cases are still classified by the State Security Bureau due to some legal restrictions such as the National Intelligence and Operation Law or the National Secret Protection Law. This leaves those responsible for the state violence in the dark and keep uncovering the truth, which is so crucial for transitional justice. Victim and human rights advocacy groups are very concerned about this. The removal of symbol of the authoritarian regime has not progressed well too. On the contrary, even after democratization, no matter which political party he or she is, national leaders have often honored the leaders of the authoritarian era. In addition, the transition of Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Park has also not progressed. I personally interpret the two-side strategy of praising authoritarian leaders while stating that they will advance transitional justice for the 220 incident or the White Terror as a compromise effort by national leaders from the both parties to consolidate the historical memory of all ethnic groups into a national history. However, it would be highly unacceptable to the victims and their families. The response of national leaders, as I mentioned earlier, such as the evaluation of the authoritarian leaders by successive presidents, not only indicate that this is still difficult to deny the party-state legacy in national elite minds, even after democratization, but also that it is in line with certain popular preference. For example, in a 2018 poll by a Meilidao electronic news agency, in response to the question, who do you think was most capable of upholding or representing so-called Taiwan values during his or her term of office among past presidency? Hoping 43% say Zhang Jingguo, triples the 13.8% of second place Li Denghui. According to another internal DPP poll conducted in 2021, 54% of respondents opposed the removal of the Chiang Kai-shek statue at the Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall. Far more than the 37% who favored it.
What do you believe are the greatest weaknesses in Taiwan's transitional process? You've already touched on some of them.
I think there are two main greatest weaknesses of transitional justice in Taiwan. One is time. That is, too much time has passed since both the democratization from the authoritarian regime and the occurrence of historical injustice to the indigenous people. So many victims are puppet later are dying, which may make it increasingly difficult to disperse materials, fade memories, and ascertain the scale of damage and compensation. Secondly, there are also constitutional constraints. In order to break through the legal restriction of the state, as I mentioned earlier, and totally eradicate the symbol of the authoritarian regime, some people are even saying that a fundamental reform is necessary, including the construction of a new state to promote a post-Republic of China state system. Furthermore, the issue of indigenous land and autonomy problem is also practically unattainable under the current constitutional system, which is a modern legal system based on the private property rights, However, it is difficult to imagine Taiwanese citizens parting with the ROC system at a time when the current popular sentiment in Taiwan is such that the name Republic of China, Taiwan, is beginning to show sign of taking root. In addition, constitutional reform would be practically impossible due to the relationship with mainland China.